We are continuing our Clemson Position 360s, now talking about the offensive line. To help us do that, we have John Chansey from Rubbing the Rock. John, appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So if you watched a couple of these, you know how they work. We talk about last year to sort of set up 2024, and then we'll talk about what's changed, and then we'll start previewing. So let's start with last year, and I've got a chart or a graphic, I suppose, that sort of lays it out. We started off with this is our offensive line. We only lost Jordan McFadden, feeling pretty good about it. Tristan Leigh, a former 5-star, felt like they were going to take a step. We were promised more depth than ever, but pretty quick it turned into this as injury struck. Walker Parks was a big one, went down, lost for the season after week 2. Trent Howard, Harris Sewell, Mitchell Mays all tried to fill the gap there. They all posted PFF grades below 53. Not ideal. Marcus Tate was really good in pass protection on the other side at left guard. 86.7 PFF for pass protection, not as good a run, but still he was solid. Well, he suffered a knee injury after 508 snaps. So later in the year, he was lost for the year. So things got pretty thin there. So given the injuries, but overall still the performance, how would you sort of make sense of what we saw last year?
Well, I think for the most part, the big problem seemed to be that this line had a really hard time adapting to the blocking scheme that Garrett Riley employed in his offense. And, I think that's what I heard in the preseason was there's a lot more pulling. There's a lot more east-west than north-south in this system that Riley brought. And that wasn't something Clemson was used to. And I don't think it was a shock, that they struggled with it a little bit at the beginning. And then things seemed to be getting better. Around, the Florida State game altogether was a relatively good effort. And then they seemed to be doing well in Syracuse. And then it just kind of fell off a cliff when that narrow win against Wake and then the 2 losses that followed the bye week. When they made that switch to trying to go back to more of a north-south type of blocking scheme and adapting Riley's offense to match that, suddenly Phil Maffa runs for 186 yards. When Shipley comes back from injury, he's running well. It really seems like the problem last year was that for whatever reason, this team just couldn't figure out that blocking scheme that Riley wanted them to run. And so I don't think it's a shock at the end of the year they made the change and brought in Matt Luke. Looking at what they have coming back, there's a lot of experience. So that the question is going to be, obviously they wouldn't have, fired Thomas Austin if they were just going to give up on Riley's scheme and try to run, classic north-south without very much movement. They brought Luke in to teach these guys how to do it. And the question is going to be, how effective can he be? Can these guys pick it up? Because there's a lot of experience on paper. This should be a really good line coming in this year. The question is just going to be, can Luke whip them into shape? And then at the guard position, the injury situation just is a little bit worrisome. That concerns me the most. Even though they're replacing and bringing in a new center, I think it's the guards that really worry me the most there.
So I think that's a great point you make regarding the scheme, and I think it's easy to forget. I hadn't planned to talk about it, so I sort of forgot it, honestly. But in the interview that Thomas Austin did with Larry Williams, excellent interview, Thomas Austin talks about how he basically went to the coach and said, hey, we got to simplify. And that's right before the Notre Dame game when they were awesome. But to your point, if the offensive line can't execute the offense to its fullest, that's a problem. So now we got Matt Luke coming in. Before we talk about that, a couple other guys to mention. Blake Miller was the right tackle. He was Clemson's only offensive lineman with a PFF grade over 70 at 72.9, which was 7th overall in the ACC among tackles. And then on the left side was Tristan Leigh, as mentioned, big-time 5-star, had some time in the program. Got off to a little bit of a slow start to his career because of COVID, and Virginia canceled high school football his senior year. So you give him a little extra time for that. But he kind of struggled as a run blocker. And so that was a pretty notable downgrade from Jordan McFadden. Overall, the offensive line play was definitely disappointing. And you hit on one reason, but whatever the reasons, a disappointment. So now we look forward. And so I'm going to pull that graphic back up. So here was last year. Here's what we're looking at moving forward. So you get Walker Parks back, presumably the starter at right guard. You get Marcus Tate back, presumably the starter at left guard. And then it's the same story as last year. You got to replace one guy, Will Putnam. Now, he's a guy who's played a ton of snaps for Clemson, so maybe not so easy to replace. But they've got highly recruited guys in the, vying for the spot with Harris Sewell, Ryan Linthicum, maybe Trent Howard, not as highly touted, but in my opinion, just as good on the field. So it feels a little bit like a repeat of last year where they had to replace, Jordan McFadden, one of their better guys, in that case, by far their best guy on the line. Only one guy. You think they're going to get better. Same situation this year. Do they actually get better this year? How optimistic are you?
I'm really optimistic that they're going to get better. Whether, how much improvement they're going to make is going to depend. But I'm a big believer in certain situations where just a change in coaching can mean the world to a group of guys. And, at the head coaching level, I go back a few years ago. I don't think anybody in the world thinks Scott Satterfield is a great coach by any means, but you saw what happened when he went into Louisville the season after Bobby Petrino. Basically, it almost looked like he didn't even try. A guy like Scott Satterfield came in, and immediately that team was better. That can happen when just the coaching is not clicking for some reason. And I think Thomas Austin's a great guy, and by no means would suggest that he wasn't trying hard, but obviously something wasn't working. And it's the biggest thing. I mean, this is the most difficult group on the field to analyze and really understand what they're doing. It's 5 guys all trying to work together at one time, trying to all read the same signals and make the same decision. That takes some special coaching. And I am hopeful, based on everything I've heard, that Matt Luke can pull this off and get these guys working together as a unit, which I think has just been the biggest problem for probably since 2020. Just seems like the guys aren't always on the same page. They're talented. I mean, you're right. Blake Miller, I think he could be a monster this year if those guards stay healthy. I mean, they're as good an interior guards players as there is around. If they can all get on the same page, I think that this group can take a step. Now, they brought Matt Luke in to make the offensive line a strength. They want to be putting guys into the first round in the NFL draft. That's going to take a few years. That's going to take a few classes, I think. But as far as seeing these guys working together as a unit this year, I think that can happen. Now, is it going to happen against Georgia? I don't know. I don't think we should get our hopes too high right out of the gate, just considering the talent they're going to be facing on the field. But I do think that realistically we could see this. The word I keep using is crescendo. This is something I think we can see continually get better as time goes on. By midseason, I think there's a very good chance we could see this offensive line playing very well. They've got the experience, they've got the talent, and they got 2 really good guys. One guy, I'm not sure you mentioned him in the intro. Collin Sadler is a really probably going to be the 6th man, so to speak, and he can plug in at either guard or tackle. And then you got Sewell, who if he's not starting at center, then he's pluggable at both guard positions. So I'm optimistic that they're going to be playing more coordinated, like you said a minute ago, that we will see some of that depth this year. Now, how far beyond Sewell it goes is going to depend on how well Matt Luke can maybe develop a few of these guys where the light hadn't come on yet. A Dietrich Pennington, a guy who was out most of last year, and Ian Reed, who a lot of people were excited about. Trent Howard, Trent Howard is he's a high floor, low ceiling kind of guy, but if he can find the right role, he's a really reliable guy.
Yeah, I actually think he's overlooked. Him aside, this is an interesting piece of trivia. Let's see if it's obvious to you. What did Tristan, Leigh, Walker Parks, Marcus Tate, Harris Sewell, Collin Sadler, and Ryan Linthicum all have in common? They're all blue chip 4 stars or 5 stars, every single one of them. So Matt Luke is not, the cupboard is not empty. They just need to be developed. Thomas Austin, he wasn't a failure as a recruiter. It's just, we just need to activate it, to your point. So, the other thing you said that I think is really interesting. We're going to the 12-team playoff. You don't have to go 12-0. You don't have to go 11-1. You can go 9-3 and then win your conference championship. You got to buy. If you're a great team at that point, you can get hot. And, I don't really love that style for sports, but that's the deal now. So, if they do crescendo, that could be perfectly fine. Now, a few other things I meant to mention, changes from last year. Mitchell Mays departed via the transfer portal. He played 352 snaps, but he struggled. He actually had a really low 47.1 PFF grade. He's going to Charlotte. And then Zach Owens, he didn't play much, just 16 snaps. He transferred to Colorado. 4 new guys coming in: Elijah Thurman, Mason Wade, Ronan O'Connell, and Watson Young. I don't think any of them will play a big role. If I had to guess one, maybe it's Ronan O'Connell. Do you anticipate any early action for them?
Probably not. Now, Thurman was rather highly rated. And I do think, I could be wrong about this, I do think that they consider him one of the guys that might be a tackle at this level. I do think, if I recall correctly, Watson Young, he was injured, and I'm not sure what his timetable is, but he was hurt during his senior year in high school at Daniel.
Right. I'm
not sure when he's coming back. So I think they've considered him out of the running for that center position.
I imagine.
Yeah, O'Connell's just a big dude, and that he realized, and Mason Wade I think is too. So I mean, I suspect those guys are probably going to take the redshirt route. Maybe Thurman. I mean, but guys like this, they got to come in and they got to show something quickly in fall camp to really get the attention of the staff, and that's been a problem. Even though Dabo and some other people may say at the beginning of the year, boy, we're going to have some good depth. We're going to have a 2 deep. Clearly, these guys aren't making their mark in fall camp and convincing the coaching staff that they can be put on the field and relied upon. So I suspect those guys are going to need power hour this year.
I tend to agree. Last thing on the offensive line, I think the big position battle is center. I think the others, with Parks coming back, presumably healthy, and Tate coming back, they're probably your guards and your tackles. Assuming Tristan Leigh is locked down left tackle, which I guess Sadler could battle for it. But the real position battle is at center. Ryan Linthicum was a big-time recruit who was actually a center recruit, but he hasn't played hardly at all. Harris Sewell actually got some snaps last year. Trent Howard, you said it great. Maybe not the highest ceiling, but a high floor. Any indication of where this is going, or is it too early? And just for folks, we are recording this before fall camp.
Yeah, so to me, it probably comes down to Linthicum and Sewell, and I would suspect that they're simply going to give both of them an opportunity in fall camp and see which one does better. Quick note: one of my best freezing cold takes ever, Ryan, was when Linthicum was coming in as a freshman. JP may remember this if you talk to him. I was certain that Linthicum was going to be starting as a true freshman coming in here. I was so excited that the Tigers had actually recruited a guy who played center in high school instead of trying to convert somebody. And yeah, I missed by a mile on that. But personally, I think the best case scenario for Clemson is for Ryan Linthicum to grab that spot and hold on to it. And the main reason is what I alluded to a few minutes ago with the guards. I'm concerned about their health. In the case of Walker Parks, a lot of people say, he should be back, but there are very few people at this point that I hear say, oh, he'll definitely be back in time and ready to go. It sounds like there's a little bit of a question. That was a pretty bad injury. On the other side, Marcus Tate, he hasn't finished the season for the last 2 years. After a good freshman campaign, I think he missed 5 games 2 years ago, and the last 3 games last year, or maybe reversed. But he hasn't finished the season in a couple of years. So there's a little worry about Parks at the beginning of the year and whether or not Tate maybe be able to make it through the entire year. Sewell is one of those guys that could become very critical for this team at the guard position. And it's going to be a little bit of a disruption in their chemistry if they start Sewell at center and then they have a problem with either guard position and they want to move Sewell over and then bring Linthicum in. That's disrupting the chemistry on the line. It's disrupting the chemistry between the center and the quarterback. They do have Sadler, who is somebody who could probably plug in But if it got to the situation where they needed, those both guys, Sadler and Sewell, at the guard positions, then it's just easier in the big picture. If Linthicum goes in there and grabs that job and holds on to it, Sewell's going to see the field, So one way or another, he's going to be part of this rotation this year. But, now that being said, if Sewell goes in there and he's the best center, I have no doubt that they'll put him as the starting center and say, look, we'll just roll with the punches as they come.
Yeah, I mean, the way you lay it out, that makes them 8 deep, right? With Trent Howard, with Collin Sadler kind of as a swingman on the outside, and Sewell as a swingman on the inside. Not that they can't move around more than that, but that would certainly be ideal. Hey, John, thanks for doing this. We'll break here, and we'll have another video to talk about quarterbacks. Before we cut, I do want to remind you remind listeners that this channel is sponsored by Ready Vets. If you are a pet owner and live in the upstate, check them out. If you have immediate needs, you can walk in and they'll take care of you.